This poor high schooler is Truck Kun's latest victim, and when he wakes up, he finds himself in an isekai world. But what he doesn't know is that he has a hidden trait that makes him immortal. The story begins in a medieval isekai world, where a high schooler named Ryo can be seen lying down inside an empty cottage. The cottage has no furniture inside, except for only 2 books and a knife left on the table. Ryo gets up, ignores these 3 items, and goes outside to get some fresh air. He looks around and sees nothing but tall mountains everywhere. He then looks at his hands and chants the spell, "Water, come forth," prompting a small body of water to appear magically and splash in his hand. It all begins a few days ago, when Ryo suddenly finds himself in a white, empty void. As he starts to wonder where he is, the angel hosting this realm appears and, reading his thoughts, assures him that this realm is not the afterlife. The angel expresses how glad he is to finally have a visitor after years, but at the same time shows grievance because Ryo has just passed away in his home world after getting hit by Truck Kun. Ryo is already aware of that, and he also figures that he's about to be reincarnated. So he asks the angel, naming him Angel Michael in his head, what he should do in his next life. Michael advises him to live however he wants to. Ryo has always wanted to live a slow and boring life, and after getting Michael's approval, he gets ready to be reincarnated into the world full of magic known as Phi. Before letting him go, Michael tells Ryo more about the world of Phi. According to Michael, only 20% of the world's population knows how to use magic, and in Ryo's case, he can also use magic and is most compatible with the water element. Since he requested a slow, boring life, Michael transports him to the forest of Rondo to live alone in a small cottage. Michael has already arranged 2 months' worth of food in a small ice house. Inside the cottage, he has also left 2 books that can help Ryo learn both about the world and how to use magic. And only after reading the book does Ryo learn how to summon a small body of water out of nowhere. For now, he doesn't need to worry about being harmed by the forest's monsters, because Michael has created a barrier around the house. Ryo once again practices using water magic and is able to create a water ball just by imagining it, discovering that he no longer needs to chant the spell out loud. Pretty convenient for the main character. Using his magic, Ryo then fills the bathtub with fresh water, which I think is gross because the water is technically coming from his insides. The water in the bathtub is super cold, so he must now find a way to heat it up. He gets ready to light a fire using, of course, the most ancient, inefficient technique known to mankind. After failing to light a spark after several attempts, he gives up and wonders if there's a way to work around this with magic. Putting his previous life's chemistry lessons to good use, Ryo separates hydrogen from oxygen, which causes the water to crystallize and turn into ice. Now that he has ice, he uses it as a medium to condense the sun's rays, using it like a magnifying glass, and manages to unlock fire. With that fire, Ryo finally unlocks hot water and takes a slow, long bath. His thoughts clear up, and with his mind refreshed, he realizes that he can just make hot water using magic by applying the same technique in reverse that he used to make ice. But that's for later. For now, he goes to eat dinner. While eating, he realizes he must start hunting soon as his food supply will run out. But he hesitates, because if he goes out into the forest, he's surely going to encounter monsters, which he believes he cannot defeat with that small knife Michael left him. This means he will now have to unlock offensive magic as well. The next day, Ryo works on his first attack spell, Water Ball, but it doesn't deal any damage to the target tree, so he modifies the spell, narrowing the ball into the size of an arrow. Only after hours of practice does he manage to unlock the most basic form of the water jet spell, which, to be fair, still doesn't deal any damage to the target tree. The following day, he works on improving his ice magic since his water magic hasn't shown any signs of effectiveness in battle. He carefully creates an ice crystal but fails to levitate it because projecting ice is not as easy as water. Still, after several hours of practice, Ryo manages to summon several ice crystals at once, but still fails to launch them at the tree. After several days of trial and error, he becomes skilled enough to at least form ice crystals in an instant, but he still doesn't possess enough power to use them as projectiles. Regardless, because time is running out, Ryo works around it, using the ice crystal as a spearhead and venturing into the forest. Near a riverbank, he finds some quartz and is glad because he can now use it to light a fire in case he depletes all his mana. He then goes to collect some medicinal herbs when a monster named Lesser Boar targets him as an easy kill. The boar charges straight at him, but out of fear, Ryo fails to move his feet which almost ends his isekai journey right then and there. But at the very last second, the thought of dying again helps him jump away. This time, he uses magic to his advantage, making the ground slippery by turning it into ice, causing the boar to slip. He then quickly makes several icicles appear before the boar, and the boar ends up getting pierced to its demise. The adage, desperate times call for desperate measures, suits him so well, because see him pull off water magic in the heat of the moment. Well, it was a great attempt, but he's still nowhere close to being good. He goes home and immediately learns about monsters in the Monster Compendium, and it doesn't take him long to realize that lesser boars are the weakest of all monsters. He takes his time to read through the book to learn about other creatures he might encounter, because maybe his slow life isn't actually slow. He reads the page that talks about dragons, and all the book can tell him is that when he sees a dragon, he should run. It's not like he can outrun it. He'll still die, but he should still make an attempt to run. He flips to the next page that talks about an Akuna. For this monster, he doesn't even have to run. He just has to pray he doesn't encounter it. The book doesn't seem to help him much, but he keeps reading. You'd assume he'd be discouraged by his last hunting encounter, but a boy can't stay indoors forever. Hence, the following day, he prepares himself and goes outside again. The day starts on a good note as he finds a tree with fruits. When he takes the first bite, it truly makes up for all the stress he went through the previous day. It tastes so good. Well, it brings him another stage of stress as an assassin hawk flies toward him and knocks him down. He sees that the hawk is stronger than he is, and there's no way he can conquer it. The hawk uses air magic that is invisible, so there's no way he can fight back. He remembers the idea from the book and runs, but how will he outrun a bird? Seeing he's trapped, he stops to fight. He uses his ice magic to trap the hawk. When he assumes the hawk is dead, he goes closer to it, but the hawk breaks through the ice, though one of its eyes is injured. When the hawk realizes he's stronger than before, it runs off. He sighs in relief and collapses to the ground, complaining that the slow life he asked for isn't actually slow. He tries to find his way back home but realizes he's lost after running from the hawk. As he navigates the forest, he sees something that scares him, a Dullahan. It has no head, and smoke pours from its neck. The Dullahan is tending to its horse. One way or another, he finds his way back home. As time goes on, he trains to get better. From fighting several monsters to fishing, he upgrades his ice magic so much that his ice can now cut through a mountain. He keeps trying to get stronger, and at this point, he's getting a hang of his new life. However, every night he returns to the place where he found the Dullahan to fight it. Not because he wants to win, but maybe because it makes him stronger. He doesn't know much about Dullahans, because there's nothing about them in the Monster Compendium he's reading. So it's either the Dullahan isn't a monster, or it's not in the beginner's book. After another failed fight, he admits that the only reason he keeps coming back is because he feels the Dullahan wants to make him stronger. He watches as the Dullahan makes an ice sword. The Dullahan holds the sword toward him, and he takes the hint that it wants him to have it. After he accepts the sword, the creature leaves peacefully. The next few days, or maybe weeks, are calm for Rio. Well, until he encounters the revengeful hawk again. On that fateful day, he's training as usual when he sees the hawk in front of him. He notices it's missing an eye, so he immediately knows it's the same one he fought before. However, the hawk wasn't black before, but now it is. It also looks bigger, which means it has evolved. The hawk comes at him with so much strength that Rio evokes his 5-layer ice wall, but the hawk breaks through it without stress. He invokes the 10-layer wall, and the hawk breaks that too. When he uses his ice lancer, the hawk flies right through it to attack him. The stick he uses for support falls, and in the heat of the moment, he picks up the sword he got from the Dullahan and attacks the hawk. The sword works. The hawk falls back, then comes at him again with full force, but he uses the sword to pierce it, and it falls. He walks up to the hawk, admitting that the creature is quite determined. Well, he had taken its eye again, and he knows the hawk wanted to fight back. However, for him, fighting the hawk has made him stronger, so he has the hawk to thank for that. He also admits that the hawk evolved just to fight him, so he gives it a moment of honor by letting it die by his hand. He removes his sword, and the hawk dies. He continues his journey, unaware that a dragon is nearby. The dragon comes up to him and speaks. He's shocked that he can hear a dragon's voice. The dragon is also glad that he can use his telepathy again. He asks Rio if he's seen an evolved hawk, and Rio says he killed it. The dragon wonders how Rio could have the power to do that, so Rio shows him the sword. The dragon recognizes it as the sword of the Fairy King, and asks what Rio did to the Fairy King to receive such a gift. But Rio doesn't know either. Since he's done with his questions for Rio, Rio also asks him a few questions. They talk until it's late, before the dragon says he has to leave. Before leaving, Rio introduces himself, and the dragon says his name is Lewin. Rio is literally having a swell time in his new life, so much so that the angel who reincarnated him checks his slab again and realizes he missed something important. Rio has a hidden feature in this new world that the angel didn't notice because the last person he sent there didn't have the same power. It's the power of eternal youth. How will Rio use this power? What does this mean for him? By the riverbank, a strange boy with a red hair lays on the sand. Who is he? The story begins as the Demon King launches an all-out invasion on the entire world. This invasion leads to the downfall of many nations, including the Gargan Empire, which has the largest population of humanoid warriors. As humans, elves, and dwarves slowly become cornered and face extinction, they are forced to take desperate measures. They combine all their forces and fight the demons like there's no turning back. Among them comes a suicide squad that manages to infiltrate the Demon King's castle in a final attempt to slay him. After a long and grueling battle that decides the fate of mankind, the Demon King is finally defeated, and the heroes of the Suicide Squad are about to escape. That is, until they stumble upon something even more ominous. They discover a woman shackled in chains, guarded by two monstrously powerful demons. One of the heroes, Theron, seems to recognize the imprisoned girl and decides to stay behind, instructing his two teammates, Kyle and Ursa, to leave without him, and they do accordingly. But on their way out of the castle, they enter a room where a mysterious crimson crystal is being stored. The male hero, Kyle, begins to approach it when several magic orbs strike from above. While he manages to block most of the attacks with his sword, one of the orbs hits him directly, leaving him completely defenseless. That's when Ursa, his mage comrade, steps in front of him and uses the last bit of her power to shield him, sacrificing herself to save his life. As Ursa disappears into nothingness, the mysterious winged attacker finally reveals himself before Kyle. Overflowing with rage and grief, Kyle charges forward in a reckless attempt at revenge. But even after landing a blow, his attack does nothing. The winged demon relentlessly launches enhanced deadly feathers at Kyle, giving him no chance to counter. Kyle's sword spirit informs him that the technique the demon is using is called Elimination, an unblockable high-level spell that destroys everything in its path. Knowing he won't survive the next strike, Kyle makes a desperate choice. He decides to release the full power of his sword's gemstone. The sword spirit doesn't object, willing to do anything to protect its worthy wielder. Kyle activates his ultimate attack, unleashing all of the gemstone's power, and strikes the demon with everything he has. His blade pierces through the enemy, ending the demon's life, along with the swords as well. Silence follows, and Kyle realizes he's the only survivor of the battle. Even though peace is finally restored, he has nothing left. His home, his friends, his loved ones, none of them survived. With nothing to live for, he collapses to the ground, ready to give up. But out of nowhere, the crimson crystal starts glowing uncontrollably. Sensing danger, Kyle pushes himself up with the last of his strength and walks toward the crystal to stop it from doing anything that could harm mankind. But the moment he touches it, everything fades to black. When Kyle regains consciousness, he finds himself lying in his bed in his own room. But how is that even possible? Seeking answers, he rushes to the window and sees his city in the distance, the one that should have been in flames and reduced to rubble, completely intact. As tears roll down his cheeks, he becomes convinced that this must be a cruel dream created by his mind. Then the door opens. His childhood friend, Lisa, enters casually, telling him to come downstairs already because he's been sleeping for too long. Kyle stares at her in disbelief. Lisa, of course, doesn't understand what's going on. She assumes he's acting strange because he has an upset stomach and comes closer to check on him, only for Kyle to pull her in for a tight hug, overwhelmed with joy just to see her alive again. She blushes and asks him if he's drunk or something. She tries to get away, only for Kyle to hug her more tightly. This ends up with both of them conveniently falling onto the bed, leaving Kyle completely flustered. Lisa, finally gaining some control, shoves Kyle away from her and strikes him with a punch to the gut. She screams at Kyle, saying that whatever he just did to her, she needs some time to process it and must prepare herself mentally before giving him a reply. After saying so, she calls him Abuka, and runs out of his room. Kyle, still clutching his stomach in pain, suddenly realizes that he's not supposed to feel any pain, as this is supposed to be a dream, which means whatever this is, it must be real. He notices something under his blanket, and as he lifts it up, he finds the crimson crystal lying there, making him realize that it was the crystal's power that allowed him to go back in time before the invasion had begun. Looking in the mirror, Kyle figures out that he is now much younger than he was. He takes a look at his body to see that he has no injury, which makes him believe that this is no dream. He takes a look outside the window to see that the land is back to normal, and since Lisa, the love of his life, was alive, he concludes that he has been sent to the past. This thought leads him to take a much closer look at the magic stone, but he doubts that it would have the power to send him to the past. While he deliberates on this, his stomach rumbles from hunger, and he rushes out to find something to eat. Fortunately, he was met by a full table of food which Lisa had made. The sight of this reminds him of the time when Lisa would always come over to help him and his mom with the cooking. Without wasting much time, he helps himself out by destroying every single plate. After a while, he ends up finishing everything on the table. At that moment, his brother, Theron, strolls into the dining room to have his breakfast. However, he is met by a table as empty as his brother's head. The thought of Kyle finishing everything by himself shocks Theron, but he chooses to let it go since that day was Kyle's birthday, even though Kyle doesn't see this as a worthy enough birthday gift. Meanwhile, seeing Theron, he is reminded that they were just in a fight together before his death. However, the hungry brother leaves to find a solution to his hunger. On the other hand, Kyle finally realizes that he has indeed returned to the past, but in order to get answers, he goes to ask his mother some questions. As she always did in his previous life, Kyle's mother spends her time at their underground library. She had been reading all night and had lost track of time. Ignoring that fact, he proceeds to ask her the question. Since she was an archmage, he believed she would be able to provide an answer to it. Just then, he seeks to know if a time-traveling spell exists, and she reveals that it does exist. However, before he gets excited, she goes on to tell him about how rare a spell like that is. Furthermore, she informs him that such a spell cannot be used since it requires an immense amount of magic power, one that even the most powerful mages do not possess. In that moment, he seeks to know if a magic item can actually be a catalyst to store an immense amount of magic power, and she confirms that it is possible. However, such power would require a being that has lived for centuries. Also, there exists the possibility of generating such power from having hundreds of lives lost. In this case, the deaths caused by the demons had led to an immense transfer of magic power to the magic stone that had caused Kyle to return to the past. What would you do with this stone if you could get your hands on it? While you think about this, Kyle's mother brings a book with a picture of the only magic item capable of storing such power. Just as expected, the magic stone in his hands was just the right item. It happened to be the legendary divine dragon's heart, which had been missing for over 1,000 years. This completely answers Kyle's questions, and he is pleased that he got to have this conversation with his mom after a long time since her death in his past life. Although she is thrilled with how matured he has become, not knowing that she is speaking to a son who is about a decade older. When the two are done with their questions and answer session, she stands up to go and eat. But when he informs her about the absence of any meal, she is left with no choice but to offer it to him as a birthday gift, just as Theron had done earlier. Now, I'm left to believe they are just broke. Later on, Kyle goes to a quiet place where he looks at the stone one more time. He imagines what his old self would have wanted him to correct. Just then, Diesel arrives, and he immediately apologizes to her about the morning incident. He claims that he had a weird dream that led him to hold on to her behind, stating that she was isekai'd in his dream. Hearing this makes her believe that he truly cares about her, and she forgives him. After that, he wishes him a happy birthday. Looking into her beautiful eyes, he is reminded of the incident that led to her death. Apparently, their town was the closest town to the demon territory, and when the demons proceeded to attack humans, they were the first to be taken down. The touching moment she took her last breath shows itself, and he had vowed to avenge her death. While thinking about this, he gets lost in his thoughts, and she calls him back to reality. The two sit together, facing the sun, but Kyle remembers that they would experience the havoc of the demon attack in 3 years. He takes it upon himself to find a way to stop this from happening, or risk losing everyone he loves like he did before. He is determined to change his fate and the fate of the humans. But wait, did he really have to stand up and say it like a wannabe top G? Later that night, Kyle spends his time documenting all the future events he can remember. He considers telling people about the pending demon attack, but is convinced that nobody would believe him. Since that's not an option, he is hell-bent on killing the Demon King himself, even though he is nothing but a pathetic weakling now compared to his old self. Regardless, he picks up his sword to test himself and see if he stands a chance.